welcome to the Ghosts of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 84 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we will be discussing chapter 10 of A Clash of Kings. That's Davos 1, a new POV character.
A new POV. Look at us expanding our horizons.
Mm-hmm.
Davos. Well, as always, we're going to chat about the chapter, and we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you, and hopefully we're going to provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what's happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the TV show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll provide some additional information about the characters and venues in this chapter. How are you, McKelly?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I am tired. I'm working hard.
You are.
It's too much for me. It really is.
Yes.
I need some time off. But hey, they pay me modest bucks, so I need to suck it up. But I have a nice story for you. So I've been doing so my mum is she's senior. I'm not going to give her age away on the podcast. She might be offended. But she lives alone in England, and they've been on a long lockdown like everybody else. And,
right.
Credit to her, she has learned how to do. I don't think we do Zoom meetings. I think we do like Google Hangouts.
Okay.
Google Meet meetings, but we do one every week with the family. And I've got my wedding anniversary coming up. Before we next record, I will have been married 22 years.
Woo! All right.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff.
My mother is very good at sending cards for such events. She never misses one. And so we have already received in the mail a card wishing us a happy anniversary. But before the card arrived, it had been opened. Clearly someone had gone in and looked for something, and my mum is not averse to sending cash in the mail.
Right, yeah.
So I was like, oh, God, someone's stolen the money. So on the call with the family, now my family have a certain view of me, and I'm not sure it's entirely fair, but, they have a view of me.
You haven't even said the punchline of this story yet, and I'm already laughing because I think I know where this is going.
So I told my mum, I said, Mum, the anniversary card arrived. Thank you. You're so kind. Now, Mum, I don't want to come across as a money-grubbing chiseler, but did you put any cash in that card?
That's what I thought it was going.
My siblings were all over that. They were like, you don't want to sound like a money grubber? Well, stop talking.
Too late.
They were so happy. But the good news is she had not sent it.
Okay, good.
Because so here she is. My mother is quite the technological whiz kid. She wire transferred us some money instead.
Wow.
I know. She just does this kind of thing from her home. Like, through the internet, she did that. I was like, oh,
she Venmo it to you?
Well, I don't think you can do Venmo internationally.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
So, yeah, I think that's only a national thing. So, well done, Mum. I know you don't listen, but you were smart to do it that way, because if you'd done it the normal way, it would have got nicked.
Right. How about that?
Yeah.
That's really the part
but
of the story.
The handwriting on the front of the card makes her look like an old lady. And I'm sure that if you handle mail and you see obviously a card from an old lady, you must be like,
there's something good in here.
Exactly.
Oh, man. Well, I just came from dinner. And while we were sitting at dinner, it was Stacy and Molly and me. We got to talking about the good old days, about the 80s, about growing up in the 80s versus now. And Stacy and I were talking about how, we did have video games, but they weren't the all-consuming kind of video games that the kids have these days. And then we spent a lot of time outside playing sports or running around playing tag or whatever. And we were just kind of talking about different activities that we got up to as kids. And Molly goes, I know you had color back then, but when you guys were talking to me, I'm picturing this in gray, and Mom like wearing like a big hoopy skirt, and Dad wearing one of those like flat hats. I was like, oh. But Stacy goes, "Girl, I'll cut you."
Yeah. That's particularly unfair on you, given that you're so much younger than me. That hurts me a lot more.
Perspective, I guess.
Yeah.
To Molly, that's about 1 million years ago.
Right, we have got the longest chapter in the history of the book to get through,
We
why
do.
don't we cut to the chase here? So, let's get down to business with a quick recap of what Davos was up to. Well, I mean, nothing really. He's a new POV character, it's the first for like 90 chapters, right? I mean, all the other... There wasn't a new POV character halfway through Game of Thrones. It was...
No.
They were all established right at the start, so it's been a
much.
long time since we've had a new one. But we did get to meet him back in the prologue, if you remember. He tried mildly to stop Crescent from poisoning Melisandre. He also had just returned from meeting or trying to meet with the Storm Lords on Stannis' behalf. His mission was unsuccessful, as most of them are back in Renly, and that's where we left him. So, McKelly, why don't we give them the summary of this chapter?
All right. Well, the gods are burning on Dragonstone, and Melisandre convinced Stannis to drag the statues of the Seven out of the Sept and set them on fire as an offering to the god of light R'hllor. The reaction is mixed. However, any lords who voiced opposition to the idea find themselves dead or in a cell along with Sept and Bear, and the remaining lords have taken the hint.
So, quick question. Is Sept and Bear dead and in a cell?
He's in a cell.
Okay. As Davos watches the spectacle, his mind drifts. First to Maester Cressen's sacrifice, sharing a cup of poisoned wine with Melisandre to protect Stannis from her influence. He died, she didn't. Then to the other lords and how they don't accept him as more than an up-jumped smuggler. Finally to all Stannis has done for him, raising him from low-born to a landed knight, saving his sons from what fates they were to suffer as sons of a smuggler. At the price of some finger joints, he thinks it's well worth the cost.
Melisandre calls forth legendary hero Azor Ahai come again to pull a flaming sword from the burning statue of the mother. Stannis steps forward and pulls the sword of fire free with the aid of a heavy glove and a thick leather apron. Melisandre proclaims it Lightbringer, the legendary sword of heroes. Factions of the gathering crowd chant, "A sword of fire, it burns," over and over again, led by Queen Selyse. Pretty quickly, Stannis' glove begins to smolder, so he sticks the sword in the dirt and walks off to the castle, bringing his wife with him. The sword's flames dwindle and die.
Davos and his eldest son Dale and Allard make their way to the port. The boys dislike the burning of the gods, but Davos questions why the sons of a smuggler are so devout. Allard reminds him he's a knight, not a smuggler. Davos excuses himself from his boys and makes for the inn. There he finds flamboyant Lysene pirate Salladhor Saan alone at a table. Davos joins him, his old friend.
One of Saan's ships has just arrived after a stop in King's Landing, bringing news. Aside from the news of Tyrion's promotion to Hand of the King and him replacing Jaina Slynt as City Watch commander, he tells of a city that is poorly defended and ripe for the taking. He also informs that Lord Renly here, is marching in force toward King's Landing, his new queen in tow. Saan suggests now is the time to strike the city, but he then quickly changes the topic, announcing that the burnt sword Stannis pulled from the flames was not Lightbringer, and that Davos should be thankful for that.
Salladhor explains that Lightbringer was forged by Azor Ahai to fight the darkness facing the world. The man spent 30 days and nights forging the sword, only to have it shatter when placed in water to temper. Next, he spent another 50 days and nights forging the sword again. When he finished, he plunged it into the heart of a lion, however the sword again shattered. Finally, he spent 100 days and nights forging the sword. This time, Azor Ahai called his wife Nissa Nissa to him. He plunged the sword through her heart. Her blood, her soul, her strength and courage went into the steel, and so the sword was born.
Before leaving, Salladhor asks Davos to remind Stannis he'll owe the pirate another 30,000 gold dragons soon, and he should have given him the statues to sell instead of burning them. But if he gives him Queen Cersei for a night, he'll forgive the king. Later, Davos is summoned to Stannis. The king asks him to read a letter, which Davos is unable to do, so Maester Pylos reads it instead. The letter announces Stannis as Robert's true heir, and Joff, Myrcella, and Tommen, products of incest between Cersei and Jaime.
Stannis plans to use all the ravens at his disposal to send the letter to every lord he can reach. He also wants Davos and his sons to take letters to port towns, post the letters to alert the small folk. Davos points out Stannis has no proof of this accusation and worries that a reference to R'hllor in the letter will offend many. Stannis responds that he does have proof, Robert's bastard son Edric Storm at Storm's End. Also, that although he doesn't put stock in R'hllor, the fear of Melisandre's power is the most dangerous weapon he has, and he plans to use it to his advantage.
Whew, that's a long one, all right.
Yeah. I think we've done well on the summary there, because we didn't make it feel like... How long was it?
The chapter was 51 minutes on my audiobook.
Wow, that is a beast.
Yeah.
Is that longer than the
No, I think the prologue was like around 70 minutes or so.
Right.
It's a little bit longer.
So just when we go to Dragonstone, we just dawdle on Dragonstone.
I think Martin's making up for lost time, since we never got there in a Game of Thrones. When he gets there, he just wants to, relax a little bit and hang out.
Yeah. But it's great. I mean, Davos is going to become a great character who we're all going to be invested in. But I mean, the whole thing is interesting because it's that great sort of contrast between Stannis literally is the rightful heir to the throne.
Right.
But he is, by some distance, the least equipped to take the throne.
He is. Yes.
So
he's not that the irony of that is not lost on him either.
Yeah. That's gonna burn like the sword, like the fire of R'hllor.
Especially for a guy like Stannis, who is so by the book, by the rule, it doesn't seem very laid back, like, I got a good life here on Dragonstone.
Yeah, that seems like a bit of a stretch, to be honest. The good life on Dragonstone.
I've got a life on Dragonstone.
Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to ask you about, what did you think of the prudence of burning the gods? I mean, obviously from Melisandre's position, she's trying to establish R'hllor as the main religion of Stannis' camp.
Right.
But a lot of the people that they need, I mean, my God, they don't have enough people to lose any.
Right.
And several of the people who, like you said, they've ended up in the cells for not abiding by this new religion, and it's understandable. People are attached to their childhood religion. It's the nature of the beast.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's quite the gamble. So one thing he says at the end of this chapter is that the men, just the thought of Melisandre scares a lot of people, and that a scared man is a defeated man. And so obviously there must be rumors going around, probably involving Crescent and his demise, about her power, and that might keep a lot of people in line, even if they disagree with what's happening. But you'd also have to worry, especially since they seem to be primarily a naval force, that ships might just take off in the night, Right, good point. Yeah, he doesn't have a master of whisperers like Varys to say, hey, that guy's about to take off on you.
Yeah, and I think even looking beyond the borders of Dragonstone, I mean, he really needs to attract new people to his cause.
Right.
And one of the ways to attract new people to your cause is with religion. But burning the gods of the religion that pretty much everyone you're trying to attract holds to, seems like a pretty short-sighted. I mean,
yeah, that's what Davos says at the end of the chapter as well. Is you're going to offend a lot of people, and you need people. So I agree. But Melisandre says there's one line, and I missed it the first couple times I read through this chapter, but it's actually on like the first page of the chapter. She says, she's like, it's during this whole ceremony, and she says, Lord of Light, we offer you these false gods, these 7 who are one, and him the enemy. So it sounds like she is saying that these false gods are... Okay, well, so let me back up. R'hllor faithful believe that there are 2 gods, R'hllor and his enemy, the Great Other. So it seems like Melisandre is saying these false gods are actually the Great Other, the enemy, posing as as
Yeah.
these gods. So I didn't catch that the first couple times through, and I thought, that's kind of an interesting detail.
Just a thought which has literally just occurred to me here. Given that he's calling Relor's enemy the Great Other, is this actually the core of this whole story? Is this the battle between fire and ice? Because when I hear the word Other here, I start immediately to think of the northern scary monsters.
Yeah.
And Relor is clearly the god of light and fire. And is this the fulcrum of it all?
It's very possible. Yeah, you've definitely got. Maybe there's multiple fire and ice. I mean, you've also got Targaryens who are fire. That their dragons breathe fire. You've got the Starks who live in the north where they're surrounded by snow and ice. So, but this definitely feels like one of the fire and ice battles.
Yeah. We'll be right back.
Hello, friends. Are you ready to make some unforgettable memories? Well, if so, consider the Marriott Bonvoy program. Discover the perfect destination for your summer getaway and unlock exclusive deals on luxurious accommodations. With our affiliate partnership, you'll enjoy unbeatable savings and a seamless booking experience. Don't let summer slip away. Visit Marriott Bonvoy today and make this vacation season one for the books. Use our Ghosts of Harrenhal affiliate page to check it all out and buy Bonvoy points or give some as a gift. The link to our page is in the show notes.
So Melisandre describes Stannis as Azor Ahai from legend, and she provides this prophecy of him that a long summer will end when the stars bleed and the cold breath of darkness falls heavy on the world. The hero shall draw from the fire a burning sword, and it will be Lightbringer. It's very convenient.
That's where I was going to. Does she have any evidence to support that this is actually a prophecy?
And his initials will be SB.
No one here on Dragonstone is going to know whether she's legit or she's full of BS. Right. So we just had the end of the longest summer in living history. We got the red comet, so the stars are bleeding. So certainly, if you take her at her word, it would make a believer out of someone who's willing and ready to believe. Be like, yes, this is perfect. It fits perfectly.
Yeah. I also think that the whole sort of pageantry about we're drawing Lightbringer from the statue is interesting because you kind of get 3 points of view of it. On the one hand, it seems to fulfill this prophecy. This prophecy is tailor made for showing that Stannis is the true king. And the rebirth of the legendary Azor Ahai. But those prophecies, when you fulfill a prophecy like that, you always seem portentous, and it sort of gives a sort of majesty to anything that you do around that prophecy,
right? Inevitably.
But Davos is kind of a down-to-earth guy, so he kind of sees the mundane of it. He sees the burning oven mitt.
Right.
And and the apron that he's wearing so he doesn't get burned by the fire. And it's like,
right.
Yeah, okay. That's kind of like you're seeing behind the curtain. The wizard is just a guy.
Yeah.
But then Salador has the more ominous take. The true saga of Lightbringer is one of I looked up this word, uxoricide. It's strange. It's strange that uxoricide is not more common actually, because it means killing a wife. You'd think that that's actually quite a common murder.
Right.
But I mean, regicide and fratricide and things like that. But for some reason, uxoricide, although quite usual, is an unusual word.
Probably done more frequently than regicide.
Right. Yes. There's a lot more uxors lying around than there are Reggies. Yes.
Right.
But also of brutal ambition. So it's not exactly the backstory you want to be replicating as you sort of start your campaign to be king.
Yes. I was a little bit confused by it by this whole ceremony here, because Melisandre's sermon suggests that pulling the blade from fire makes Lightbringer and Azor Ahai. But if Salador San's story is to be believed, Lightbringer is like a physical thing that was basically took 180 days to craft, so therefore not recreated through a ceremony. So it feels like anyone could have put on a glove and an apron and pulled that sword out of the mother's heart. It's not exactly like pulling the sword from the stone. It was...
Well, but anyone could have done that, but only the true king did. That's
right,
the point.
But literally anyone with an apron and a glove could have gone and pulled that sword out. Davos could have done it, and then he would have been Azor Ahai. So I don't know. It left me wanting a little bit.
Yeah, but that's it's the nature of the fact that Melisandre has power, but she's also a charlatan.
Yeah, I guess so. It certainly leads to that possibility. Right now, we've seen her survive poison, but this wasn't exactly the most mystical, magical ceremony that we've witnessed.
but I mean, not to offend the religious, but I think pretty much anyone who's selling religion is a mixture of things, is a mixture of belief and showman.
Sure, because it's faith, so it's all based on faith.
Right, and so clearly this story is very self-serving in this moment,
yes.
to make him sound like...
Very much.
But the thing is, there's so many stories from the times of legend that maybe you just pick and choose as you want,
Right, yeah. Yeah, ultimately, I guess my point is that, is it a physical thing, or is it something that you can take any sword, put it in fire, and pull it out and say, now I have Lightbringer?
But I think her point is, all the other parts of the prophecy are falling into place. Let's do a little pageantry to finish it off. You know?
Yeah, and it must be. Because otherwise it doesn't... Unless you found Lightbringer, which they would have mentioned in the details of this chapter, had they physically found Lightbringer, then they're just remaking it, but they're not remaking it.
Yeah, I definitely think you're slightly overthinking it. I mean, to the people surrounding on the beach, not in the most innermost circle, because the people in the innermost circle will be like, man, he looks like a glorified baker in his apron and his oven glove.
That's what I was thinking. It basically looked like he was pulling an overburnt pasta out of the oven.
But to the people in rows 3 and back, they would be like, oh, look at that. He is, he's Azor Ahai reborn. Yeah. Salador makes a funny comment. He says, it's not a burning sword, it's a burnt sword.
Yeah.
Nothing special about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny, but it's also an important distinction because it's unclear. It doesn't specifically say that the flames burn out, but the description leads you to believe. He said the flames were sputtering and dying, and then they wrapped it in a blanket, which certainly sounds like the flame had burned out. But you would think if this were a Lightbringer that the flames would be perpetual, kind of. It would be a burning sword, not a past tense burnt sword.
Yep. And we have had one other burning sword in the whole thing with Thoros of Myr.
Yes.
Fights with a burning sword.
He's also a priest, Red Priest of R'hllor.
That's right. So he must be he might be one step above Melisandre because he knows how to get that thing burning and keep it burning.
Right.
And at no point did we hear of him fighting in the melee or at Pike wearing an oven glove and an apron. so it is possible that he's also figured out how not to make the thing roasting hot at the same time.
Yeah, I did think about that. I did think about this. It was Stannis' first time with this sword, so maybe he'll get better with the sword as he practices with it. We did a background on R'hllor back in Sansa 2, which was the chapter where she went to the Hands tournament and Thoros won the melee with his flaming sword. And one thing we mentioned in that background is that the legend of Azor Ahai is very similar to the Westerosi legend of the last hero.
That's right. I remember the background now, yeah. So Davos mentions that there were rumours that Cresson was struck down for his impiety. He, of course, knows that it was poison. But he does, he is a little bit in awe of Melisandre at this point, because clearly something saved her from that poison, which killed Cresson in no time at all.
Yeah. And he conjectures that it's, her god saved her from it. But we had posed the idea, Crescent mentions that the poison came from the Jade Sea area, which is where Ashai is, which is where Melisandre's from. We had posed the possibility that she had built up a tolerance to this poison, a la Princess Bride, you know.
Yes.
But that optic right there of everybody heard Crescent defame R'hllor, and then moments later he dies. You know, that must have been a pretty powerful optic for Melisandre's side of don't take my lord's name in vain or you'll end up dead.
Right. I've got to say that anyone who currently finds themselves in a cell for not believing Melisandre, who was also in that room, is a braver man than me. Because
right.
I would have been a convert right there and then. You win.
Yep.
So Davos ruminates about his when he was knighted but lost his fingers, and how it saved him and his family.
Yeah, he's gained a lot from it, no doubt. Back in the prologue, just a quick reminder, back in the prologue, we learned that during the siege of Storm's End, on a dark, moonless night, Davos navigated through both the Red Wine blockade and the rocks of Shipbreaker Bay to bring food, which was primarily onions and salt fish, to Storm's End to help them survive until Ned lifted the siege. And the ship was all black, sails, hull, oars, etc. And he was rewarded for his efforts with, he's been given lands and a keep and raised to a knight. But he was also punished for years of smuggling, and he lost the top joints of all the fingers on his left hand. Which, if you remember back in Tyrion 2, I was talking about all the hand injuries. It's another hand injury.
There you go, yeah. So, one thing I would say is the lands that he's been given are on Dragonstone. It's not called Dragonfield or Dragon...
Well, his keep is on Cape Wrath, which is in the Stormlands.
Oh, it's I misunderstood that. I thought Cape Wrath was part of Dragonstone. So his wife is there.
Yeah, his wife and his two younger sons, Stannis and Steffan. Yeah, so he's playing to the audience there. Yeah, they're back at his lands on Cape Wrath.
I misunderstood that because I was like, man, that's really not a selling point if it's just like a corner of Dragonstone.
Right.
You can have these stones. Oh, thanks.
You get that from that big rock over there to that big rock over there.
But it does make sense. I mean, because as a smuggler, so he has 7 sons. Is that right? 7 was the count.
Let's see. He's got Dale, Allard, Mathos, another M1 who's escaping me right now. Devin. Yeah, 7. Devin, Steffan, and Stannis.
Yeah. So, I mean, as a smuggler, their great hope for life was him coming back. Smuggling's a dangerous occupation, and eventually you won't come back from it.
Yeah.
And so Stannis really has saved them from that, giving them lands and giving them a keep. This is a change in fortune for them, which is kind of overwhelming.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I can kind of see why he's so grateful, but at the same time, he did lop my fingers off, and I'm finding that hard to forgive. I remember when my son was a year and a half old, he bit my finger, and I have never quite forgiven him for that. Because it hurt so bad.
And I can see you kept the joint. You still have that finger joint.
I still have that finger. Every time I look at it, I think of that time. Davos is clearly tougher than me. That's the... He's
at least a very forgiving sort.
Yeah, for sure. But now I think about it, I can see how it really is an amazing gift he's been given.
Oh yes, because it's a generational game changer. In fact, that's the very next thing that he thinks about is that he thinks about how these High Lords like Lord Valerian and Celtigar, they don't really give him the time of day, and they never will. But he hopes that his grandsons will joust with their grandsons, and then in future generations, maybe they'll even Merry when they kind of forget about how his house, the roots of how his house began.
Yeah, they'll be free of the taint of onions.
Yes, but that absolutely hinges on Stannis either winning the Iron Throne or settling some sort of truce. You know.
Yeah. Okay. So winning then.
yes. If we know Stannis, it's only winning, because if they lose, it's all over.
I do like the fact that you get to see a sigil be born, because most of the sigils are obviously well established, and it's kind of cool to see one have its inception and its origin. We often read up about what the origin story of the sigil was, but it's kind of cool to see one happening in real time.
Yeah.
I mean, it happened before the book started, but it's brand new.
Yeah, but that actually brings me to my next thought: is that it's the second time in this story that we've seen a sigil be born. If you think about it, we've got two small folks who were raised to lords, Davos and Jaina Slynt, and they handled their elevation very differently. Davos still thinks of himself as a smuggler raised high, which irks his sons because, they want to think of themselves as a son of a knight, not the son of a smuggler. And in fact, Allard says, You're not a smuggler. You're a knight. If you won't remember that, why should they? Meaning the other high lords. But Davos is humble and he's thankful and he feels very much indebted. So
yes. But actually, it's interesting. So both Davos and Jaina Slynt are from King's Landing, so they both had that same origin story.
Yeah.
But what's also interesting is the one thing they have in common beyond just being elevated and creating their own sigil is that they were both very loyal to the people who elevated them.
True. Yes.
Janos never betrayed Cersei. He stuck with her through thick and, well, not through very much because he got hoisted by Tyrion pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I think even while he was being hoisted, he was planning to go back to Cersei and say, "Hey, this isn't fair. I'm your man,"
Right.
And Davos is the same in that respect. I mean, he's clearly never going to betray Stannis.
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. That's a very good point on both parts. I guess the primary difference is just their humility level.
Well, yes, true.
Immediately, Janos wanted to forget that he was a small folk. Came from being a butcher's son, and then did get elevated to commander of the City Watch. That's a pretty big jump. But then to Lord of Harrenhal, he wanted to forget all that past. He came up with his new sigil and didn't want to look back. But whereas Davos can't stop looking back. He can't stop seeing himself as still a smuggler. Yeah.
So a good point here is that, and I'll give credit to McKelly for noticing this, there are two factions here on Dragonstone. Stannis, for the paucity of Stannis' army, more than half of it is due to his wife, Selyse Florent.
Right, yeah.
The biggest contingent that he's got are actually people loyal to him because they're loyal to her.
Right. Yeah.
And this is a problem for him because he's got to keep her sweet, basically.
Well, yeah. Normally they would all be the King's Men. But because of Selyse's connection to Melisandre and the fact that Stannis doesn't really believe, he says at the end of this chapter, he doesn't believe in gods. So his lack of true belief in R'hllor and Melisandre, and Selyse is just 100% buying in, has created these two camps, the King's Men and the Queen's Men. But you're right, the Queen's Men is a very significant portion of his military strength. But Davos thinks that the Queen's Men are ambitious knights and minor lords who are willing to buy into the Lord of Light thing in order to earn the favor of Selyse.
So at this point, Davos retreats to the pub and finds his friend Salador Saan alone, which seems a bit strange to me. The way I think of Salador Saan, I think of him as sort of like a bit of a roister who would always be surrounded by drinking buddies, but maybe the nature of Dragonstone is you sit quietly in the pub and drink a pint. Yeah. But so Salador reports that Renly has married Marjorie Tyrell, and that he marches to King's Landing from Highgarden along what's known as the Rose Road.
Yep.
This is, if you remember the most recent Cat chapter, that's how that one concluded. She was going to go down to see Renly to try and get him to do exactly this. So she's either chronologically she's already achieved her aim, or it's happening without her intervention.
Yes, and that poses a question of whether this is what the Starks wanted. They wanted Renly to march on King's Landing, which would draw Tywin out of Harrenhal to march to defend King's Landing. Getting the whole key of all this was to get Tywin out of Harrenhal so that they could do something with him instead of him just sitting there. But the question is, would it have helped for the Starks to have a deal in place with the throne winner beforehand so that they have that they can negotiate favorable terms? If Renly goes to King's Landing and wins the throne without the Starks' help, there's not a whole lot of bargaining chips they can throw down. But if they could say, "Hey, we'll help you win your throne if you allow us to break free," he might be more inclined to take it at that point.
Yeah, it would be an interesting position for everyone to be in at that point, because the Starks have no beef with Renly Baratheon,
right?
And in actual fact, they would have some gratitude towards him, because basically he drew Tywin Lannister out of the Riverlands by attacking King's Landing. He killed Joffrey Baratheon, the false king, and he took the Iron Throne. But they've just claimed that they're their own independent kingdom and broken away.
Yes.
So now, what's Renly's attitude to this? They're obviously, the Starks aren't going to back down at that point.
That's why I'm saying it might be more beneficial for them to have had a plan in place.
Oh, yeah,
so that he can use their help.
Right.
They could say, "We'll help you. We'll team up. Let's do this together. But when you win, we're out."
We're out, yeah. But the other thing is, I think Renly personally probably feels some sympathy for the Starks, because he knew Ned, and he knew what Ned was getting into, and was powerless to save Ned.
Right, he did try.
He might actually say, "You know what? I mean, it'd be great if I could be king of the Seven Kingdoms, but honestly, they've done this. I can't stop them. I think I'll let them go." Or does he say, "I can't have people picking away at my kingdom.
Yeah,
I can't let this lie." So yeah, it could create an interesting situation if that happens.
I think a lot depends on his position when he has to make that decision.
Right. Yes. If he's sitting on the Iron Throne, that's one thing. If he's dead, that's another.
If he's sitting on in a camp outside somewhere, still trying to win the throne, he might be more willing to negotiate terms.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then Davos gets summoned. His son Devon actually brings the summons. He gets summoned to King Stannis, and Davos mentions that he arrives at the Stone Drum. And if you're wondering what that meant, it was actually referenced back in the prologue as well. It's the huge tower / central keep of Dragonstone, and it actually got its name from the booming and rumbling sounds heard during storms, which Cresson also mentioned in the prologue.
Yeah. So, on his way to see the king, Davos passes a bunch of the other lords, and they all basically ignore him or curtly nod at him. But Sir Axel Florent, he stops and chats with Davos. He's the Queen Selyse's uncle.
Yeah.
He's the former Castellan of Dragonstone, has been for 10 years. And now he's a huge believer in R'hllor. Perhaps he saw Cresson die. In fact, he did. I believe he did see Cresson
definitely
die,
did, yes.
Yeah. So there you go. Axel Florent, that's my spirit character in the book. He's the younger brother to Alistair, head of House Florent. And their other brother was Ryan, who's Selyse's father, who's now dead. Right?
Yep, that's exactly.
And then Axel says, "I made note of you this morning," talking about the scene on the beach with the burning gods.
Yeah, curious thing to say.
It is a weird thing to say.
And Davos is wondering why he's even talking to him. Like,
right,
why
everyone else is just
why is Axel stopped talking to me? But that whole "I made a note of you this morning," I wondered, was that of his own accord, or did someone ask him to get a feel for what Davos is thinking and saying? Because he's not a huge supporter of R'hllor. He hasn't been verbally, vocally saying such things. Was it possibly a reminder that he's being watched? Maybe one of the things that Davos was concerned about when he was talking to Salladhor Saan is that Salladhor Saan was saying rather blasphemous things about priests of R'hllor at the table without any care that he was sitting in a crowded inn. And maybe one of the Queen's men overheard that conversation with Salladhor and mentioned it, and so he's saying.
I have a slightly different take on this. I think my take on this is that this the point that you've made, that there's a division between the Queen's men and the King's men here. I think Axel Florent obviously would be one of the Queen's men.
Yeah.
I think they don't have the King's ear, and Davos does. Davos is, in many ways, he's Stannis' most trusted advisor.
Right.
Stannis. We don't quite know how Stannis treats Davos at this point, because he's never talked to him really, in the books until this point. We've never seen him talk to him. But we do know one thing: Stannis believes in Davos' loyalty.
Yes,
and that will make an honourable man confide. And so maybe this is the Queen's men trying to make a bridge to find out what the King is thinking.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. I hadn't even thought about it that way, but yes. I could see that. But Davos says he doesn't trust Axel, as House Florent declared for Renly. Well, that's not entirely fair, because that's a tough spot for Axel. And any Florents, so far he and Selyse are the only ones we've met on Dragonstone, but any other Florents that are here on Dragonstone, because they had no say in the decision. It was Axel's older brother, Alistair, that made that decision. And, I think we mentioned it in the prologue. I can't really... I went back and looked at our notes. I couldn't find it. But Alistair's daughter, Melissa, is married to Randall Tarley, who is also a primary bannerman to the Tyrells, who have also pledged their fealty to Renly.
Is she Sam's mom?
Yes, she also happens to be Sam Tarley's mom. Yes.
Right.
We'll be right back.
This episode is sponsored by Audible. To get a free audiobook, or 2 if you're an Amazon Prime member, go to our exclusive URL, audibletrial.com/ghostsharrenhal. You can find the link in our show notes.
But I mean, you've got to give these people the benefit of the doubt. I mean, it's not like they've jumped in a boat and gone, well, we're out of here. We declared for Renly.
Exactly.
They've stayed put.
Yeah, it's a little hard on Axel to not trust him because his house is backing Renly. He's here.
But then again, you might keep an eye on him to see if he's packing his trunk.
Yeah, true. That's true.
So Davos can't read, which is an interesting discovery. Stannis gives him a letter, and he passes it on because he can't read it, which is... Well, I mean, he was a smuggler. It's not entirely surprising that he wasn't taught to read. But it does also sort of compromise him as a useful lieutenant of the king, because obviously a lot of this is passing letters to and from your friends and enemies.
Yes, right. It definitely is a limitation there.
Yeah.
But one thing, so obviously, like Simon just said, Davos can't read. So Maester Pylos reads the letter for him. And when he finishes reading the letter, Stannis has 2 issues with the letter. He says that Jaime should be referred to as Sir Jaime, regardless of what he is and has done. He's still a knight. And also, in the letter, Robert is referred to as his beloved brother Robert. And he says, that's not true. Neither of us loved each other any more than we had to. And Pylos says, it's just a small formality. And he said, it's a lie. Take it out. And it just goes to the fact that Stannis is all about facts and truth and accuracy. And I wonder if he's not a young person. He's at least in his 30s, you would imagine. Not that that's an old person, but I don't mean he's not like a teenager. So he's been around for a while. And I wonder if anyone that has met Stannis, if they have gotten an idea of his character, they would know he's really not one to lie, regardless of who it benefits. And I wondered if that would carry any weight with the lords in accepting his letter when they receive it.
Yeah, and actually, that also makes me think back to the whole oven glove and the sword thing. I mean, I'm kind of surprised that he played along with that charade, because,
Yeah.
I mean, there was nothing magical there.
Right.
He was wrapped up to protect his hand. He pulled it out. It wasn't any special sword. It was just an old sword that was on fire. And then he grudgingly stuck it in the sand and walked away.
Right.
It feels like you're taking part in a mummer's show. There,
Yes,
Stannis,
that was the term I had in my head too. It felt like a mummer's show. Yeah. But I wondered if it even matters whether they believe he's telling the truth or not, because most of the lords have already picked their sides and they're not likely to change. And most of them don't find him very likable anyway.
Right, and most of the ones who've declared for Renly have already bought into this idea that Renly's the true king.
Yeah.
That Joffrey isn't the true king anyway. Maybe, I don't know why they came up with that without any evidence, but...
Yeah. Yeah, and it goes back to, we all know that Stannis is older than Renly. So if point A is that Joffrey is not Robert's son, and point B, Stannis is the older brother, then how do you get to point C that Renly is the one we should back for king, other than the fact that you like Renly better?
Right. Right.
But
yeah.
what?
In which case, the truth is neither here nor there.
Right.
It's not going to move. It is not going to move that dial.
That's what I mean. Does it really matter whether he's telling the truth or not? Because they picked Renly because they know him or like him better. Yeah. But one detail that shouldn't be lost again in this whole conversation here is that Stannis has safety concerns for Davos and his sons about posting the letter. He wants these letters taking he wants Davos to go north all the way up to White Harbor and stop at all the port towns along the way. He wants Dale to go south around Cape Wrath in the southern part of Dorne all the way over to the Arbor, and he wants Allard to go over to Essos with these letters, but he only wanted them to post the letters and let people read it. And Davos says, well, that's not very useful. Most people can't read. Let me read the letter. Well, obviously not Davos read the letter because he can't read. But Stannis says, yeah, well, that would be better, but also more dangerous because this isn't going to be taken very well. So It's surprising, or maybe not surprising. It's just, it's informative about him that he was concerned about their safety over a larger spread of this news.
Right, yeah. I'm not reading this next part out. If you're going to make fun of me, you're on your own.
Oh. But there was obviously there was no mention of taking any ships to the west coast of Westeros. I guess we can understand that as Lannisport and Casterly Rock are along the west coast. Probably not going to find a lot of friendly ports to stop in and read these letters. But just a second, before you get onto your little anti-Simon joke, there's not a lot of point going very far at all, really. I mean, Dorne is obviously one that you could bring to your side, because in Dorne we know that the Martells are no fans of the Lannisters. Yeah. But
that could just be one raven takes care of that.
Right, yep.
You don't
Raven
need the
Sunspear.
small folk in the fishing towns to believe. You just need the boss to believe.
Yes, I think that this whole thing is about the fact that he doesn't feel like the lords are going to take his letters seriously, so he's hoping to build a groundswell, grassroots from the people up.
Right. Yeah, I see that. But then skip over Dorne entirely. Just send one raven to Dorne and you've got one big ally straight away.
Yeah.
And then try the groundswell around there, because, yeah. So if you went a little bit beyond Dorne, you'd come to Old Town, right? What would you do there, McKelly?
Well, oddly, Stannis never mentioned Old Town, which I would think is a highly important city, because as Simon's dreams tell us, maesters have strong influence over the lords and the realm. So you get the Citadel on your side, and that's a big boost for you.
Actually, you know what? I know you're just making fun, but that is actually a very good point. I mean, if the Citadel really were to sort of come down and say, "What are you all doing? Stannis is the true king.
Yes,
Spread
exactly.
the word," you know. And actually, that also makes me think. I wonder about the church, and this is another reason why this whole making a pact with R'hllor might not be the right thing, because the church might be another way to get to the hearts and minds.
Yeah. The issue is that the High Septon is in King's Landing, who would be hard to get to convince otherwise. Whereas the Grand Maester is technically in King's Landing as well, but the Archmaesters and all the other high-powered maesters are in Old Town, which you would have access to easier.
Yeah, true. So Davos and Stannis talk about Cresson a little bit. Stannis, bluntly says, "Well, he gave me bad counsel, but I am sad that he's dead." So, I mean, he's got a heart.
Right,
He's not quite as easy to shed a tear as I am, but, he's got a heart. So the bad counsel that he refers to is that Cresson suggested that they betroth Shireen, Stannis' daughter, to Robert Arryn, Jon Arryn and Lysa Arryn's son, the new Lord of the Eyrie. Stannis was actually considering that until Selyse chimed in and said, "We shouldn't be begging other people. As the royal family, they should be coming to us," kind of thing.
Right.
So, not terrible advice, really.
No, that's why I
advice.
I wanted us to remind everyone what the council was, because it's very debatable whether that is bad advice or not. I guess it just depends on your perspective. Making allies isn't a terrible idea when you have the smallest army and the smallest amount of supporters.
Correct. You are correct. But maybe if Shireen Baratheon knew what Robert Arryn was like, perhaps she would vote for this being terrible advice.
That is a good point. He also was suggesting that they ally with Robb Stark, and Stannis says he wasn't giving up half his realm. But half a realm is better than no realm at all, I guess you might say.
Yeah. So Stannis mentions that the lords that surround him are, similar to Robert's small council, flatterers and fools.
Yeah. He has a funny line about Celtigar. He says that Lord Celtigar, Davos asks him, "What did your lords think of this letter?" And he said, they nodded and bobbed their heads like geese or something like that. And he said, Celtigar called it admirable, and he said, "If I showed Celtigar the contents of my privy, he'd call that admirable." That made me chuckle.
So, but I think it's a common thing for kings. I mean, you're going to be surrounded by people who think your jokes are funny,
Right. Yes.
Because if they don't, they're not going to last long,
Yes, that I feel like that's true for anyone who's famous.
Right, yeah. If you're in a position of authority over someone, they're going to be toadies around you.
They're going to laugh at your jokes, even if they're not all that funny.
Right.
Yeah.
Davos is honest with Stannis in the way that very few of his counselors are. He says, "You don't have any proof of this incest." But he does have some proof, because he was with Jon Arryn when they visited Baby Barra and Gendry, both of whom looked just like the Baratheons.
Yeah. And he also knows of the existence of Edric Storm, who is a bastard of Robert's that he fathered with Selyse's cousin on Selyse and Stannis' wedding night. But the problem is that he is in Storm's End, and Renly is the Lord of Storm's End, not Stannis. So, that...
But of course, the one thing is, they both have that in common, that they would want to parade Edric Storm around and say, "Look, that is what a Baratheon child looks like. See these little blonde urchins? That ain't them."
Right.
They're not Baratheons.
We've not heard what Renly's claim is for the Iron Throne, right? But you're right. He has Edric. He has better access to Edric than Stannis does. So you would think, to discredit the Lannisters and Joffrey, he would be parading him around, saying, "Look at this dark hair. This looks just like my brother, not those people, not those kids."
But then this makes me ask a question, and I'm sorry if I've just forgotten, but does Renly have any knowledge of the incest? Or any knowledge even that, any suggestion? Has anyone confided in Renly that
Not that we know
they
of.
might not be?
No, we've not heard.
So he's just come to this conclusion by himself. Laughing, jolly, not very nice, well, not nice, but, not very serious Renly has launched his own genealogical investigation and come up to the same conclusion that Jon Arryn and Ned Stark did, and Stannis Baratheon.
Well, we don't know. We don't know what Renly's claim is. He has not come out and denounced Joffrey.
Right, but that's the thing. Why claim the throne when you know your nephew is A, on the throne, and B, has a legitimate claim to the throne?
Yes, that's we need to talk to Renly, because
We do.
Nothing makes a whole lot of sense yet coming from his camp.
Unless he knows what Stannis and Ned and Jon Arryn knew.
Right.
But I'm amazed that he would know that.
Yes, that we have
Given
no
his
evidence to
personality.
support that he knows these things.
And then if he does know it, yes, Edric Storm would be right by his side
Right.
to be paraded around with a big point to his face. Not Joffrey.
Not Joffrey. Although it might possibly strengthen Stannis' claim. Because he's
Of course,
clearly
but-
the younger brother. But nothing
Right.
about...
but nothing that Renly can do anything but help Stannis' claim.
Yes, right. Renly is running on a platform that we have yet heard about, that we have not been able to figure out what this platform is exactly. Other than, I'm not Stannis, I'm more fun than Stannis is.
Right, yeah. I mean, he's third in line to the throne, and he's just knocking number one, unaware of the fact that number two will then take over.
Yeah.
That's the problem he's got.
Yeah. But I wondered if Stannis knows about Maya Stone in the Vale, which is, as far as we know, Robert's first natural-born child, because it would help to have double proof, and she'd be easier to retrieve than Edric Storm. So maybe he doesn't. Maybe he has mentioned many times that he and Robert weren't close. So maybe Robert's never mentioned that he has a daughter in the Vale.
But there was time, right? Because it was before the rebellion that she was conceived and born. Right, yeah. I mean, she's like in her 20s.
Yeah.
Or at least around 20, at least.
Yeah, and Robert and Stannis were in King's Landing together for 10 years. While, according to this chapter, Davos says that Axel Florent was Castellan of Dragonstone for 10 years. Yeah,
I got to think he knows. Because, I mean, I remember Ned saying that Robert really loved Maya Stone and sort of hung around with her for a long time. Was thrilled to be a dad, kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
In his cups, which he was all the time, he would have eventually confided that in his brother. I'm sure. I'm absolutely sure.
You would think. I just wonder why he wouldn't. I know she's a female and Joff is a male, but you get her, and if you can manage to get Edric, then you've got two. Now, we do know he knows about Gendry, who's in the wind, but boy, wouldn't it be powerful to trot out two boys and a girl, all the spitting images of Robert against the two boys and the girl who claim to be Robert's children.
The one thing that I will say, and this is always, like, for me, the sort of grain of grit in my shoe about this whole part of the story. All of the Lannisters are blonde. Oh, but wait, the book says when Lannisters and Baratheons meet, it's always dark.
Yes.
The seed is strong. The Baratheon seed is stronger than the Lannister seed.
And of course, none of these other kids are Lannisters, so, Maya, Edric.
Yes, right,
Gendry.
yeah. But the Book of Genealogy said that every time there was a Baratheon Lannister wedding, marriage, the spawn of that looked Baratheon, not Lannister, every time.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. So Davos says people won't love you if you take their gods away, and Stannis, not incorrectly, says they never loved me, so who cares?
Can't lose something you don't have.
Right.
But we've talked already a lot this episode about the risk of pushing R'hllor on people. And he's already got the smallest army and the theoretically the least liked of the kings. I'm not sure how many people have met Joffrey yet. I'm guessing he would fall below Stannis if they've met them both.
But Joffrey does have that one overwhelming advantage of being, unless you know differently, the rightful heir.
Yes, right. So I guess Stannis just figures he can't win the traditional way, so he's going to try something different. That's basically what he says. My wild card is Melisandre and this R'hllor, so I'm going to do what I can. And he doesn't believe, he lost his faith in the Seven after his parents died, so he said they've never done anything for me, which is actually quite similar to Sam's reason for turning to the old gods when he took his vow at the Night's Watch.
Yeah, it does echo that. All right, awesome chapter. So background.
Well, I was torn between two options. I was either going to do a background on House Valerian's relationship with House Targaryen, but that would have been a rather long background. And knowing this episode as I do, I went with the shorter one instead. So I thought we would just give a little background on the Seven, each member of the Seven. So we've got the Father, and judgment belongs to the Father, and you pray for justice to the Father. But you can also pray to the Father to defend someone in battle, to have the strength to seek justice and the wisdom to recognize it. The Mother is considered loving and protective, and she is prayed to for mercy or safety of loved ones. Also for successful pregnancy, as Davos tells us in this chapter.
There you go.
The warrior protects faithful from enemies, and you pray to him for courage, safety in battle, victory in battle, favorable battle conditions, all manner of things. And many make offerings to the warrior before battle. You can also ask him to bring peace to the souls of the slain and to comfort those who were left behind. The smith fixes broken things, so like putting the world right type broken things, not like, oh, my teapot broke type broken things. But maybe you do that too. I don't know. I guess it just depends.
I was going to say.
You pray to him for strength. Davos says that he's prayed to the smith for the safety of his new ships when he launches a new ship. Those devoted to the smith wear a small iron hammer around their neck. The maiden, or maid, you pray to her to keep women safe. Mothers to daughters, brides, give thanks for an agreeable marriage arrangement to the maiden. The crone is described as old, wizened, and wise, and people pray to the crone for wisdom and guidance. And finally, the stranger. The stranger is both not male or female at the same time, both male and female. He is an outcast who wanders from place to place. And Davos said that the statue that was burning was more animal-looking than human. And he is the face of death, and he leads newly dead to the other world. And outcasts often pray to or pay homage anyway, to the stranger.
All right. So a comparison with the television show, I did spoil some of this chapter in the prologue because the TV show mixed some things up. So I actually talked about these scenes in the prologue. Cresson was present at the god burning, which happened before Cresson poisoned Melisandre. We also heard the contents of Stannis' letter to the world with Cresson present, and that dialogue was kept very much in place. You know, he said, "Let's call Jaime sir," and he's not my beloved brother. That was in the show as well.
Okay.
We didn't mention him, but Patchface got a mention in this chapter. He still doesn't exist in the show. Neither does Pylos, the replacement Maester.
Oh, all right.
Davos' chat with Salador is on the beach at Dragonstone, and TV show Salador also wants Cersei. That would be his favoured payment for all this.
Okay.
After they leave Salador, Davos' son Mathos was present when he was talking to Salador and was kind of like disrespectful to Salador for not being sufficiently respectful to R'hllor and Stannis. And
okay.
Davos was trying to sort of calm Mathos down, but Mathos is very, very intent on his new religion. And Davos is kind of very non-religious. It's interesting what you were just saying about the Seven, because clearly Davos has some religion in him because he prayed to the various gods at various points in his life.
Yeah.
But in the TV show, Davos is saying he never prayed when he was smuggling, but Mathos says, but we all prayed for you to come home.
Okay. Yeah.
So the religion was always in the children, and now that has manifested itself in a sort of devotion to the new god.
Right.
There is no sense in the TV show that Davos is going to be sent away to spread the word of Stannis' claims. That was going to be done purely by Raven.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm sure Davos would prefer that way.
Yeah. Pedantry? You have some pedantry?
Well, I don't know if it's pedantry or not, but I just wonder, how did Azor Ahai come to the conclusion that it was quite the jump from Lion's Heart to, I know, I have to kill my wife to make this work.
Uxoricide, yes.
Yes. Did he run this idea past his friends first? Were they like, man, you haven't slept in 80 days. Take a few days. Think about this. Maybe you just need a...
Honey, I've tried literally everything else.
Right.
Could you try a few more things before we move on to that, please?
Yeah, seriously. I mean, maybe this is all about... Maybe the moral of the story is don't make any decisions when you haven't slept well. Because,
good point. Yeah.
He was laboring night and day for 30 and then 50 days. So, and I just imagine him telling this story to the police after the fact. He's like, no. I loved her, I swear. I loved her best of all. I needed her blood from her heart to temper my sword, and I'm going to save humanity now. You'll see, I swear.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I'll defend it a little bit because all sort of like old legends and fairy tales have a degree of like, that's kind of stupid to them.
Yeah.
And so I might give them a pass on this one. But anyway, good try.
Could he maybe have started with like his sister-in-law's heart? You know, his annoying neighbor down the street.
Maybe he did start with his sister-in-law's heart, and that didn't work. And by the time he got to the next sword, his wife was not best pleased with him.
It's true. 80 days and nights he was off playing in his Smith Forge.
News and notes. What have you got?
News and notes. We quickly just wanted to express our thoughts and concerns and gratitude that everything turned out right for a beloved listener of ours who's been around since basically the beginning of this whole thing, Hestia. She had an incident in her home this past week, and it was scary, but it all turned out okay. And so, Hestia, we are glad to hear that all turned out all right.
Yes, you're in our thoughts. And we have a nice review to read out. Can I read this one out because I like it?
Certainly.
Okay. This is from Erin Cherry from Apple Podcasts, who said, "Love the podcast. I tend to rush through books because I'm anxious to get to the end and see the finale, but listening to your podcast makes me slow down and really think about the characters, why they make the choices they do, and all the intrigues and plot twists. I'm reading the books now and haven't watched the show, but plan to start it when I'm done. You guys are fantastic hosts, and I love hearing about your real-life funny stories. I died laughing about Simon's wife having to teach school from the bathroom. Yes, that was a good one. And my brother's cat. Yes, that was a good one too. So keep up the great work." Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. We will do so.
We shall keep up the work anyway. Whether it's great or not, I guess, is open to debate. But also, George Martin got his first COVID vaccine shot last week, so he's on his way to becoming.
So we can have him on the show now. That's good.
Right. That's good. And if you're trying to get to our Discord server, I know the links have been a little wonky. Sorry, I'm working on that. It is on our main GOH page, so you can always go there and get it. I'm working on getting it onto all of our episode pages. I've had some issues there, but I hope to have that worked out soon.
All right, let's conclude. There's a lot riding on this Lord of Light. You better come up with the goods. She better not just be tolerant of poisons from the East.
Right. Yeah. That wasn't the most convincing show there. It felt a lot like community theater.
Yeah. But like I say, in the half dark, he'd look good from a few rows back.
That's true. Yeah. I see your point. He's taken a big gamble, though. We know he's got the smallest army and the weakest support, so yeah, there's a lot riding on this whole Lord of Light and Melisandre wild card.
Yeah. But the Tyrion and Varys riddle about who owns the power, it's being echoed here, because Stannis thinks that Melisandre brings him power because people believe that she's got power.
Yep.
So again, this is why he takes part in the Mummers show of pulling this sword out, because he's trying to build up this impression in people's minds that the power resides here.
Yeah, that she's his wild card. People don't know, and therefore they fear her. He's going to harness that fear.
Yeah. Salador Saan and other recruits are getting restless, and they do think that King's Landing is right for the taking, and that might not be a bad idea. I mean, it's not a very long sail from Dragonstone to King's Landing.
Oh, no, not at all. But Davos disagrees, though. He said back in the prologue, and he reiterates it here in this chapter, that if they dip their oars, they'll die, that they don't have the strength. As he says to Salador Saan, we might be able to take it, but we can't hold it.
Yeah.
So,
it's difficult to imagine. It's difficult to imagine a successful sea attack on a fortified city.
Indeed,
that's difficult to do. Even knowing, as we know, that they are fairly short on troops in there. I mean, they were significantly bolstered by Tyrion's mountain clans.
Yeah.
Most of the loyal troops to the Lannisters are out fighting with Tywin's army. So this is they are vulnerable, but you need an army the size of Renly's.
Yeah, and it helps to have a land presence as well, not just
right. I mean, of course, that's what Stannis could do. He could ship up on land and walk around, but then he doesn't have a big enough army to lay siege.
Yeah, well, really, the Baratheon brothers should work together. Land force, naval force, take out the Lannisters, then sort the differences out between the two of them.
Yeah, that's right. We shall see. So Stannis feels he needs a grassroots campaign. The lords don't care for him. He needs to rally the small folk.
Yeah. Will the lords really care what people think, though? I mean, this is not a democracy type situation. They're not going to get voted out. So I'm not sure that grassroots campaign is going to do a whole lot. But
yeah, I'm a shepherd in the Reach. I mean, I hear that Joffrey is not actually the son of Robert Baratheon. I'll be like, well, in that case, Stannis should be king. What's for dinner?
Exactly.
That's as far as my interest goes.
Yeah, It goes back to what Jorah told Dany that one day in the Dothraki Sea when he said, the small folk care about good rain for the crops and health of their families. They don't care about the High Lords playing their Game of Thrones.
Yep. All right. As always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhal. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and now Discord. You can catch us there occasionally. We chit-chat.
Yes, we do. Yeah. We just were talking on Discord right before we hopped on to this episode.
To Jenny Oldstones.
Yes, that's right. And if you wouldn't mind going out and leaving us a 5-star rate or a glowing review, we certainly would appreciate that. And hey, we might read it out here in a future episode.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.